Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ChiroBusinessMojo. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle player, or MP3 player. Welcome to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast, where we deconstruct the methods, marketing, and mindset of successful business people and chiropractors from around the world. And now your host, Dr. Richard Day.
Hello, I am Dr. Richard Day, and this is the Chiro Business Mojo podcast. You are in the right place at the right time. Today, I'm excited about our guest, Dr. Bob Hoffman. He's been around quite a while. He's got great tips to share with you. In fact, he is a best-selling author, healer, speaker, entrepreneur, and visionary leader, and president and CEO of the Master Circle. He's co-author, along with Dr. Jason A. Deitch, of the bestseller Discover Wellness, How Staying Healthy Can Make You Rich, and has written and performed dozens of books, CDs, videos, all geared to provide cutting-edge material to healing professionals on practice growth, practice management, and the philosophy of success. Welcome, Dr. Bob Hoffman.
It is absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me on today.
Well, it's certainly our pleasure. Feel free to jump in and fill in any of the gaps in the bio that I may have glossed right over.
Well, Discover Wellness, How Staying Healthy Can Make You Rich, which is almost 10 years ago that I did of Jason Deitch. We, to our knowledge, were the first chiropractors ever to hit the best-selling list the first day with Barnes & Noble and Amazon. I'm very proud of that. Last year, I wrote with Dr. Porter another book called Awaken Your Flourishing Brain. I think writing for chiropractors is a very important thing. I wish more chiropractors wrote books and released them, because the more the public gets to learn what we do, the better it is for everybody.
Well, I certainly agree with that. It's amazing at this point in the 100 or so years of the profession has been around that we are still utilized by less than 10% of the public.
Yep, and I have very clear opinions about why that is, and even more important, very clear ideas on what needs to be done in order to change that once and for all.
Well, let's start with that. Why don't you share some of those ideas?
Well, look, I would like to label myself as a subluxationist. I was in private practice for 23 years. I told the chiropractic story to every patient, every opportunity I can. I talked subluxation, causes of subluxation, correction of subluxation, all day, every day. I consistently took care of about 150 to 170 visits a day, and I'm convinced to this day that I grew my practice that large because I was so committed to this story and this educational process. But I have to admit that the same story that helped us evolve as a profession, to survive as a profession, I now believe is holding us back as a profession. I want to make it clear that I don't want to get rid of the term subluxation. I think it's pivotal, and I think it's part of the history and heritage of our profession, and we should be enormously proud of it. But I do think that after literally hundreds of thousands of chiropractors talking about subluxation for 120 years, we're still taking care of a very small fraction of lay people who actually understand it or care about it. I think there are better ways, better stories, better communication skills. If I could dig in even deeper, in a fair and reasonable world, we'd all like to think that those of us who produce the best clinical outcomes would have the biggest and most successful practices. But that's not true. It's my observation that those of us that have the biggest practices are the best communicators. And communication is the key to practice success. Now, of course, I don't want to trade one to the other. I'd like to add one on top of the other. But it's those of us who communicate the best seem to engage the most patients, influence how they think and behave, and I believe there's a whole new way of doing that. I've been teaching that in my coaching for the last 4 years. I've been teaching that live at seminar for the last 4 years, and the results have just been absolutely amazing.
Well, let me stop you right there, because some of what you're saying can be considered by some to maybe be heretical.
And how has this been perceived by the profession? Is this message going over, or is there a lot of resistance?
Actually, I've encountered almost no resistance. I have spoken at multiple state associations. I've spoken throughout the United States, Canada, and Europe about this new shift in focus, and universally been acclaimed and accepted. It resonates with our colleagues deeply. I'm not giving up chiropractic in any shape, manner, or form. I'm helping it evolve to the next level. Look, Dr. Day, we've got to understand that B.J. Palmer, every year at Lyceum in Davenport in August, would give his State of the Union about what chiropractic is now. And he infuriated a lot of people and had so many who also loved and adored him. Because every year he kept evolving the profession. And quite honestly, the profession got frozen in time in 1961 when he passed away. And even though none of us will ever be able to produce or prove this, I'm convinced that if B.J. Palmer were alive and well today, we probably wouldn't recognize what chiropractic is, just based on what happened in the 50 years previous to his passing. So I think we need to evolve the profession. That doesn't mean give up the profession. It means enhance it. And again, I've gotten just about zero resistance from anyone at all levels all over the world.
That's really good news. I'm in agreement with you. I have found that when I am treating patients, I certainly educate them about chiropractic, but the patient's mindset is really on what I can do for them. And if I put in a term out there that's either controversial or really just any medical term, it's not about the term. It's about what's in it for that particular patient and what I can do for them. And there's the pain management side, but there's so much more. And that sort of comes through the patient's interaction with me and experience over time with chiropractic. And I agree with you. I'm looking to eliminate barriers for the profession and between myself personally and my patients, and to become more inclusive and get more folks in on this. I mean, my understanding of chiropractic, and I certainly don't have the experience that you have, but it's that we were the ones who have been saying prevention, treat the symptom, not the cause. And that's the message that I really want my patients to hone in on, and it sounds like that's exactly what you're talking about.
No doubt about it. You know, we've all had the experience of putting up a lateral cervical x-ray and the patient wanting to know which knee was that. We've all tried to impress the patient with our knowledge and skill set, throwing out long words and difficult terms, and the patient just glazes over. The truth is, communication isn't what we say. It's what the patient understands, hears, and interprets. And there are words that are emotionally charged negatively and words that are emotionally charged positively. And if we could learn to describe what we do in a way that the patient truly understands it and sees the value to it, all the other problems just seem to disappear or go away.
Well, let's shift and talk about the Master Circle. Tell us a little bit about that group.
Well, the Master Circle has been around a very long time. It has obviously withstood the test of time. We are a coaching company. Doctors of chiropractic hire us to come in and assist them in improving their practice and their life. We try our best to customize a coaching curriculum based on their unique needs. Look, today alone, I was on the phone with a doctor who does almost 3,000 visits a month, collects well over $100,000 a month, generates about 80 or 90 new patients a month. But I was also on the phone today with a doctor who sees around 300 visits a month, who gets 6 or 7 new patients a month, and is very happy to get close to $20,000 collected a month. I can't possibly coach these two doctors the same way. So I have to customize my coaching not only based on the personality of the other doctor, but the type of practice they want, their beliefs, their standards, and yet I have to make sure that it produces the results that they want, and I have to do all of that in an ethical and responsible way. So we believe in an identity-based coaching model, that the more we know about the doctor, their strengths, their weaker areas, their beliefs, their values, their standards, the more we could develop a unique coaching program that suits their needs. And we've all heard the expression, the proof is in the pudding. You know, our members historically grow 30-40% a year after year, and they stay in the program for a really long time. Our average member's been in the program now about 6 or 7 years. So obviously our system works, and it's highly effective, and it's been around a long time. So I'm extremely proud about that, and I wish more doctors got more effective and professional coaching. I think it would help them tremendously.
Well, that leads perfectly into my next question, and that is what separates the more successful practices and docs from the less successful? And I guess let's take the example of the two folks you talked to this morning. I mean, obviously, I don't know, have they been around the same amount of time, but is it the demographics? Is it geography? Is it philosophy? Is it attitude? What is the determining factor in those that are somewhat successful and those that are really blowing it out of the water?
The answer to your question is yes. It's all of those, but to different varying degrees. You know, some people have a personality that lends itself to success or gets in the way of success. Some of our colleagues work harder and smarter, some don't. They're not looking to build a big practice. Some are more ego-driven, some are more service-driven. Some have better technical skills, some don't. It's also what you focus on. You know, we all have heard of the 20-80 rule, where 20% of what we do creates 80% of our results. This is also true in practice. If chiropractors, or any professional for that matter, could more consistently focus on the 20% of the things that truly matter, their practices would grow. But the reality of it is that most chiropractors don't even know what the 20% of the things that truly matter are. And if they do, it changes over time. I think we'd all acknowledge that practice today is similar but different than just 5 or 10 years ago. You know, I hear all the time that, you know, guys come up to me or gals come up to me and they say, Bob, I've been in practice 29 years. The first 25 were really awesome. I don't think I've changed anything, but over the last 4 years, the way that I used to get new patients isn't working as well. The way I used to get really good staff isn't working as well. My report of findings, which used to be really solid, isn't as solid anymore. My business practices don't seem to be working as well. Could you help me? I mean, I literally hear that question a half a dozen times a month. And my responses to these doctors are always very similar. First, I ask them, have you really been in practice for 29 years? Or have you been in practice 1 year that you've now repeated 29 times? And my second comment is, embedded in your question is the solution. When you made this statement, and I really haven't changed anything. Now, this is completely consistent with our philosophy, Richard, because Chiropractic 101 tells us that when we adapt to the internal and external stressors, we're in a state of ease. When we fail to adapt, we shift to a state of dis-ease. And if we continue to fail to adapt, we go to a state of disease. Well, I'm very clear about the fact that our profession's in a state of dis-ease because profession-wide, we have failed to adapt. The world has changed. People's knowledge has changed. The internet has changed the game. The business model of chiropractic has changed. And you can't keep doing what you've always done and expect it to all of a sudden get better. But if you knew how to adapt and what are the critical linchpins to adapt, and if you focused on those things, your practice would organically grow. And that has been our experience. You know, we get kids out of school and 50-year veterans and people with enormous practices and people struggling to pay their bills and people in Canada and people in the Caribbean and people all over the United States and people all over Europe. And the principles work everywhere. You
know, I'm reminded as you're talking, there's a show called Kitchen Nightmares, and Chef Gordon Ramsay goes into these restaurants that have been around maybe since the 80s, and they used to be once successful and thriving, and now the business has fallen off, and they're using the same recipes, and they've got awards on the wall, best restaurant in 1984, 87, 88, and the owner is absolutely, he cannot believe that he needs help and that doing things the same way year after year is somehow not right. And if you've ever seen the show, or for anyone who has, the owner has to have a real look in the mirror and take a look at everything, examine those strengths and weaknesses, and then, almost get a makeover. The kitchen is made over and the menu is made over, and suddenly it's thriving again. And I see what you're saying in that analogy, and I certainly see it in practices as well. It's not, I'm fairly new. I've been around since 2009, and we're running a very similar practice to the way we opened, although we have adapted and learned a lot. But I can imagine for the people who have been in practice a long time, they may not even realized how much things have changed.
They don't, because we're habitual creatures, we go into the office not thinking and just doing today what we did yesterday. And the truth is, it does work. It just doesn't work as well, as often, as consistently as it once did. And if we were to raise our awareness and raise our consciousness, it's not all that complicated to figure out how to make modifications and refinements. Look, let's even go to some of the fundamentals of our practice. There basically hasn't been a new case history question in 60 years. Most of us got our case history questions from our field doctor's case history or our clinic's case history when we were in school, but we're asking questions that are out of touch with reality. In today's world, people are subjected to constant, chronic, low levels of physical, chemical, and emotional stress. In survey after survey of asking lay people on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being minimal and 10 being maximum, where would you rate an average day of stress in your life? Over 80% of the respondents report somewhere between 7 and 8. The human brain and nervous system was never developed to withstand that level of intense stress day after day after day after day without damage, degeneration, and disease. And that's why we're entering into the neurological epidemic in society. There are more people suffering from Alzheimer's and autism and Parkinson's and multiple sclerosis and lupus and irritable bowel syndrome and chronic fatigue syndrome, and the list goes on and on and on, than ever before in humankind. We're in the neurologic epidemic, but we're asking questions about the genetics of the patient's grandmother on their mother's side, as if that's actually going to change our adjusting protocols, or get the patient to have a sense of reality that it's their lifestyle that's damaging their health, not their great-grandmother. So one of the things I had to do when I started to make the shift 4 years ago in my teaching is I had to develop a whole practice model around this new communication. So, for example, I'd be more than happy to give you a few examples.
Yeah, please do.
I love asking a question like this. Where in your body do you hold or currently carry your stress?
Well, for me, it'd be upper back, neck, shoulders.
So, obviously, the most common answers in no apparent order is I hold them in my neck, in my shoulders, in my jaw, in my upper back, in my chest, in my abdomen, in my lower back, in my feet. As much as that answer is important to me, that's not the reason I'm asking. Mm-hmm. The reason I'm asking is because first, you'll notice that every patient has an answer. And in the process of answering you, 2 critical things happen. First, they acknowledge that they're under constant chronic low levels of physical, chemical, and emotional stress. And perhaps for the very first time, they cognated that it's negatively impacting their body. You see, I believe that every patient knows they're under constant stress. What they don't know is how is it impacting them.
Right.
So we need to ask questions about stress. I've developed over 35 new potential case history questions. Now, I'm not suggesting that anybody needs to eliminate their current form and create and add my 35 questions. But once we add in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 of the newer questions, we change the trajectory of the relationship at the case history. It's no longer just about their pain. It's about the fact that their pain is coming from constant chronic low levels of physical, chemical, and emotional stress. When we ask the patient, do you think your stress is mostly physical or chemical or emotional or some combination of the above? You know what the number one answer is? All of the above. Patients get the dilemma that they live their life and their lifestyle under. Now, in our autonomic nervous system, Dr. Day, as we all know, there's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic. And most of us know the sympathetic is the fight-flight nervous system. But what it really is our survival nervous system. We're under any kind of stress, our sympathetics kick in so that we can survive. That's its only goal. The reason we go into fight-flight is to survive. But it was designed to be a short-term resolution. And as soon as that stress went away, our parasympathetics were supposed to kick back in. Now, some of us know our parasympathetics not as fight-flight, but as rest and digest. But I like to refer to it as our healing nervous system. All healing occurs during parasympathetic dominance. Well, here's the problem. We're supposed to be in survival and healing simultaneously. But if we're trapped in sympathetic dominance, survival dominance, most of, if not all of the day, every day, our ability to heal is greatly diminished. That's why people are having more of a difficult time now than ever before of getting well. We all acknowledge that the power that made the body heals the body, but people aren't recovering today like they did 10 or 20 or 50 years ago because the energy in their system, the power in their system is so diminished because they're in sympathetic dominance, not in parasympathetic dominance. And you know what? Patients get this when you actually explain it to them.
Well, that's powerful stuff, and it's getting me pretty fired up. It's absolutely correct. I've seen that sort of thing, and I think in our American lifestyle, it is. It's unfortunately in the last 30 years or so that I can really look back and think of it is worsening, and it's sort of a spiral. And it's kind of like with patients when they come in and you say, you push on that area. Does that hurt? Well, it didn't until you touched it. They don't realize it. I think when you open that door with the questions you're asking, that's when they take that breath and they say, oh yeah, I am stressed. They may not know it until that moment when you start asking those questions. So that is a great piece of advice, and it sounds very actionable. And I think even for our listeners who maybe are not familiar with the Master Circle, that they can start incorporating those sorts of questions in their practice tomorrow. What single piece of advice would you have aside from that an experienced doc? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to go? No,
I was just going to jump in to answer your question. My most important piece of advice is that practice growth is always preceded by personal growth. And if any doctor wants to grow their practice better, they need to grow themselves first. We need to be more disciplined. We need to be happier. We need to be more congruent. We need to be living the chiropractic lifestyle ourselves so that we can teach it to others. We need to have more confidence and more certainty, more understanding. We need to be better communicators. Look, in a very simple way to describe this, when we're growing, our practice will also grow. When we're flat, our practice will be flat. And when we're going through the motions and regressing, our practice will follow suit that way as well. Our practice always mirrors us. It always has, and it always will. This is such a simple but profound concept that is 100% accurate. So if I were to give a new doctor or a veteran doctor one piece of advice, it's to work hard at becoming a better version of yourself. And of course, there are specific ways to do that. I rattled off a half a dozen or a dozen ways in the beginning of this answer, but there are endless things that we could be doing. And no different than the 20-80 concept that we talked about a few minutes earlier, there are some ways to improve yourself that are more profound and will have a faster effect on growing your practice than others.
Well, I love what you're saying. A lot of times when I talk to people, I do some work with Cleveland College here in Kansas City where I'm located, and students especially want a checklist. If I go down this checklist, then I'm successful, right? Well, there's some definite do's and don'ts and some things you need to do to get started and while you're in practice. But very similar to what you're saying, I tell people you need to be authentic. You need to be the authentic you. You need to figure out who that is. And so much of success isn't about a checklist. If it were, we could all read it and go out there and be successful. It's a lot more the headspace. So I absolutely love the message that you are sharing with us today.
And look, if I can go deeper, and I appreciate your comments, if I can go deeper, when a chiropractor calls me who's interviewing me for the possibility of joining the Master Circle, one of the first questions I always ask is, tell me what your ideal practice looks like. And Richard, at least 98 or 99 out of 100 times, the answer I get is, well, I don't really want to work with insurance. I don't really want a big staff. I only want to work 3 or 3.5 days a week. And I have to interrupt at a certain point and go, I didn't ask you what you don't want. I asked you what you do want. And the reason I bring this up, I'm glad you're laughing. It is funny but sad at the same time. The reason I bring it up is because most of our colleagues are not sure what they want. They just know what they don't want. Well, it's very difficult to accomplish when you don't know what it is. You know, it's very hard to hang your ladder against the wall when you don't know what you're climbing towards. And one of my observations after doing this for a very long time is that when you're working really hard and you're not seeing progress, it's inevitable to eventually give up. And giving up in a profession like ours is just treading water. It's just going through the motions. It's just doing what you did yesterday. You know, professionals would call that burnout. But the fact is, you're just not fulfilling your life's work. You're not feeling fulfilled. There's no joy. Now, you mentioned earlier you go to visit some offices. Well, I've been in probably close to 600 practices in my career, and I could tell you with probably a 95% accuracy rate, within 2 minutes I could tell if that practice is growing or not, based on what I call the happiness factor. If the staff is happy, the patients are happy, the doctor is happy, that practice is almost always growing. If there's very clinical atmosphere, the staff hardly looks up at you, the patients are checking their email, the doctor isn't very friendly, I can almost guarantee you that practice at best is stuck and at worst is regressing. Because these things are related. So, again, if a doctor just would take stock of what would my ideal practice look like? If I knew I couldn't fail, what would I really want to accomplish here? You know, how many days and how many hours and what kind of PVA would be ideal and what kind of OVA would be ideal and how many new patients would I really like to attract month after month? Should my staff be really well trained? Should they be happy? Should they, do they realize they're in the people business, the relationship business? And, you know, what are their skills in that area? You know, there are clear-cut factors that go into all of this. So, for example, when a doctor joins the Master Circle and we start going through these things and making these modifications, when we never need to throw the practice out and start all over. But we need to modify how the doctor thinks and what actions they work on and what they focus on and how they train their patients and how they train their staff. It's really kind of miraculous that it could take as little as 30 days. It could take as much as 6 months. It's usually somewhere in between. But that practice starts to rapidly transform itself.
Yeah, I can't imagine having a goal, whether you are a coach of a football team or someone who is starting a dry cleaning business. If you don't have a goal for yourself in business, the one I hear a lot is, well, I just want more. I'll talk to someone, what do you want your business to look like? Same question you asked. Well, I just want more. I want more patients or whatever it happens to be. But one of the things I've told people is find out who your end user is and cater to that person. If you're a pediatric chiropractor, go where the moms are. That sort of thing. But absolutely, it is somewhat shocking to me when I run across people who don't have a clear goal in mind. It makes that goal very elusive.
You're 100% right. You're 100% right. And the message I really like to give out through this interview is this is a fixable issue. People aren't broken. They don't need to be replaced. They don't need to give up. These are all trainable qualities of a successful practice. We don't have to try to figure it out. We know what the qualities of a successful practice are. And if I could just harp on your last comment, I'm also kind of stunned that when I interview these potential new members, I almost always ask, as a kid growing up, were you ever a member of a team? And it wouldn't matter if it was cheerleaders or football or hockey or baseball or basketball. Yes, I was. Did you ever have a coach? Yes, I did. Did you like or dislike your coach? And regardless if they liked or disliked their coach, when I get to the next question, would you acknowledge that your coach pushed you to perform better than you probably would have on your own? The universal answer I get is absolutely. So isn't it kind of bizarre when we're playing basketball as a 14-year-old, we have a coach, but when we're a 30 or 40 or 50 or 60-year-old with our professional livelihood, that some of us elect not to have a coach? So, to me, it again is just another example of the incongruency in how some of us think and how some of us function. And again, all of this is very fixable.
Well, sadly, we are running out of time in this interview. I want to shift things and talk about, maybe we've already talked about some broader issues, but I want to ask you some general life questions. We all learn from, I think, the biggest lessons we learn is from our failures. So what is the biggest failure or challenge or obstacle you've had so far, and how did you overcome that, and what did you learn?
That's an excellent question. And first, this is, again, very much in alignment with what we teach, because everyone has strengths and weaker areas, and all of us like to accentuate our strengths and hide or ignore our weaker areas. But in reality, it's through the weaker areas that we turn into strengths, that we grow and make progress. So for me, the answer to your question, Richard, is very personal. 14 years ago, if you were to have asked me to define my health on a scale of 1 to 10, I would have given myself about a 17. I've always had a tremendous amount of energy. At that point in my life, had not eaten meat for 20 years. I've not even taken an aspirin in 25 years. I felt great. I exercised regularly. I took my supplements. I got adjusted every week. I meditated. And then for insurance purposes, I went for a medical exam. It was the first time I saw a medical doctor personally in over 25 years. And I'm making a very long story short, but I found out I had an advanced case of colorectal cancer. That's an eye-opener, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it kind of shook me. It made me reconsider how I was living my life. And again, I'm trying to make this long story short, but obviously I'm still here. I'm doing better than I've ever done. I actually had the tumor, which we documented, that had actually grown through my descending colon wall. It actually went away before I had surgery. I still had the surgery because the doctors convinced me that where the scar tissue was, the incidence of it reoccurring were dramatically higher. But I took Einstein's quote, adapted it. If the same level of living that produced the tumor couldn't get rid of that tumor, it was time for me to reinvent myself. And what I discovered, and I don't wish this on anybody, it was not a fun time in life, to say the least. But what I learned is you either default to your weakness or step up to your greatness. And I assembled an amazing team. I rededicated and committed myself. I literally got adjusted twice a day for 90 days. I was taking about 100 supplements a day. I was drinking Essiac tea. I was meditating every day. I was taking all different types of baths. I was going for chemo and radiation. I did everything I could find. And I got better. And I've had, again, to reinvent myself. And my health is amazing at this point. I get blood tests done every 4 to 6 months. I wish the people listening to this podcast, blood work is as good as mine. I'm older. I've been in chiropractic 40 years. My energy is just as good, if not better, than it's ever been. So we learn through these adversities. We learn through these difficult times how to step up to a better version of ourselves, how to be more inner-driven and not outer-driven. We learn how to recommit and rededicate ourselves. We learn how to discipline ourselves to do what's necessary even if we don't like it. And if I had to give you one example of how I've overcome adversity to become a better version of myself, that would be it.
Well, I can't think of a more challenging obstacle to overcome than one of personal health. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. So final thoughts. Do you have a favorite book you recommend?
Wow, that's a tough question. I read about 2 books a month. I can't remember the last time I read a book just for fun. There are dozens of my favorite best books. You know, if you want to learn about leadership, I'm a big John Maxwell fan. Loved everything Wayne Dyer wrote. I'm now reading a lot of books relative to brain. In fact, I'm about halfway done with Norman Doidge's new book, The Brain's Way of Healing. Joe Dispenza's work is excellent, really, really excellent. Start with Why by Simon Sinek, which is really a great book to focus you. I love Carol Dweck's book called Mindset, where she teaches us that we either have a fixed or a growth mindset. Boy, the list goes on, but depending on the topic, is it a business book, a personal growth book, a philosophy book, a science-related book? There are dozens of amazing books out there. There's also a lot of crap, but there's dozens of really amazing books out there. And I read an average of about 2 a month every single month.
Yeah, and I think that, thank you for sharing all those with us. I think that going back to what you said earlier, a big part of success is working on yourself first. So I think definitely books about business on the business side, but personal growth cannot be ignored in that equation.
Correct. And I have 2 conflicting thoughts about this. First, the more you know, the faster you grow. But that is determined by your ability to implement and execute what you know. Because if knowledge alone was the key to success, every college professor would be a millionaire. And we know that's not the case. So my favorite quote about this is ultra-successful people are uncommonly skilled at execution. Getting it done in a timely manner. That's what separates the wheat from the chaff.
So on that note, this will be my final question. Are there any personal habits or rituals or routines you do on a day-to-day basis to make that difference in your life and to achieve the goals you've set for yourself?
Absolutely. I like to refer to these as the winning habits. And they're different for all of us, even though there's a lot of common denominators here. You know, you always want to be as healthy as possible. So it's making sure you get adjusted regularly, making sure you exercise regularly, making sure you eat healthy all the time. But it's also having love in your life. It's having a strong social network of people who will tell you the truth even when you don't want to hear it. It's also practicing what you preach. It's feeling the joy and the sense of fulfillment of doing great work, making a difference. It's feeling inspired all the time. So I'm just giving you some very fundamentals to it, but the answer is there are either habits that hold us back, habits that sabotage us, or habits that allow us to excel. If we're just a little bit more conscious about the things we do every day, it becomes pretty easy to figure out which habit is doing what. And, one of my basic philosophies is I'm a minimalist that wants maximum results. I want to do as little as I need to produce the results I want and then some. So, again, if we just pay attention, we figure out which of the things that we do enhance us, raise our vibration, makes us happier, produces the results we're looking for, and which ones aren't. And if we could just do more of the good ones and less of the less good ones, the better off we'd all be.
Dr. Hoffman, I want to thank you for spending your time with us today. I sincerely appreciate you being here and all of the nuggets of wisdom you have shared with our listeners. I know they're going to appreciate just like I have. Now, when is the next Master Circle event? Where is it? And what's the best way for people to find out more about you and the Master Circle?
Well, thank you for asking. A couple of things. First, we have our annual conference September 22nd to 24th in Orlando, Florida. You can learn more about it by going to www.superconference2016.net. We have about a dozen amazing world-class speakers, literally from around the world. The energy is sky high. The networking opportunity is off the charts. I can guarantee people, if they were to register and attend, it will be a life and practice-changing experience for them. People could also email me personally at bob@themasterscircle.net. You could call our office at 800-451-4514. If people would like to know more about coaching with us and our unique blend of coaching, customized coaching to really turn your practice around, where we either could fix, revitalize, or transform your practice, just email me at bob@themastercircle.net. We will set up a free, no-obligation 30-minute practice evaluation with you. And I guarantee I will tell you things before you tell me about your practice that will make your jaw drop and show you exactly how you can grow your practice as big as you choose to. By the way, the practice that I have been coaching for 5 or 6 years that is the biggest is the doctor sees about 11,000 visits a month, over 200 new patients a month. I mean, that is possible. It's not what we all want. We're not all willing to commit to doing what it takes to accomplish that, but that is possible. It's possible in today's world, in today's environment, if you just know what to focus on. So I'd love doctors to come to our super conference in Orlando, September 22 to 24. I'd love you to call me or email me directly. If you'd like a practice evaluation, please let me know. It'd be my pleasure.
Mojo Nation, all of this information will be in the show notes on the website. So be sure to check down there for that. Again, Dr. Hoffman, thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful. I've written down a lot to take myself and apply in my practice. Thank you once again for being here.
Thank you. Thank you again for inviting me, and thank you for doing such a great service for our profession.
Thank you for listening to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast. Go to chirobusinessmojo.com for show notes on today's episode, and jump on over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review if you enjoyed the show.